This is the ISG Digital Dish.
Welcome to Digital Dish, a podcast for women's voices and perspectives in the digital world. We interview women in all industries because digital affects them all. As hosts, we want to share our passion and humor about the digital world we're part of, and we each bring a unique perspective and view from women in all parts of business. You're going to hear topics ranging from technical to organizational challenges, anything that speaks to how women are tackling issues to improve their environment.
I'm Jeanne Cuff. I have a deep curiosity on how women approach their careers in digital, and I'd love to hear their perspective on what they do and how they think about the careers. And of course, talking to smart women is fun.
I'm Lois Coatney, and I love hearing these interviews and bringing both a historical view and a future perspective to those interviews. It's so great to have such a variety of women who do so many things in their digital careers.
And I'm Julie Fernandez. I have a human resources perspective, and I really like to think about how these discussions affect people and organizations.
Together, we wanted to make sure smart women and their point of views were being heard.
Welcome back, everybody. Today I've got Lois Coatney joining me, Jeanne Cuff.
Hey, Jeannie.
Hey, Lois, how are you? So I have a really interesting interview with a woman named Marsha Clark, and she's an entrepreneur. She's got her own business. She's an executive coach, but she's not just. I know we've interviewed some executive coaches, but none of the women that we've interviewed are just executive coaches. They are so involved in how to get women and understanding what the roles of women are in organization.
Well, I was looking up when you said that you were going to talk with her, and I think you put the title on this as Invisible Differences.
Yes.
And I was interested to see if she had something out there. And it turns out she has a book called Embracing Your Power.
Yes.
Women's Path to Authentic Leadership and Meaningful Relationships. But I'm curious, there's lots of very interesting topics in her book, but I just wonder what path you guys went down when you had your chat.
Well, that was the challenge. It was a huge challenge. She's so interesting. She has so many different ways of talking about how women can support women and organizations can support women. So I really was fascinated by what she calls the invisible differences, and she takes it through different stages of life. It's really interesting because it tells you how we start from a biological standpoint. She's like, look, right off the bat, 98% of the men and women's brains are exactly alike. There's no difference. But there are some things that girls respond differently to. And I don't want to give away the good stuff because she's really is so interesting on this. But just different things that boys and girls respond to from the cradle, from literally birth. And then what we do is we walk through the stages and we get to the point where we're saying, how do we look at that from an organizational standpoint?
Wow.
So it's She really goes down to the basics. Like this is where we need to be aware of the differences, so we don't have to have it hold us back or companies can make adjustments to it.
Well, I'm very interested to hear this, and I'm probably going to be sitting there going, gee, I wish I knew this when I was younger. Like most things I hear, gee, I wish I knew that when I was younger.
Well,
but
exactly.
It's never too late.
Right. No, exactly. And that's what I felt the same way. Exactly. So I think she's really a dynamic interview, and I really enjoyed talking to her, and I'm really excited about her new book. I'm going to get that. And the other thing is, this is from a recommendation from a guy that we work with, Bob Trauber.
Yeah. And yes, when he knew that we were doing this podcast, he very quickly sent us her name because he used to work with her and just really thought she had a great message for all of us that all of our listeners would love to listen to. So thank you, Bob.
There you go. Shout out to our ally.
That's right.
Bob. All right. Well, and so you're going to listen to it and we'll come back and talk about it. So enjoy the interview with Marcia Clark. Today, I have Marcia Clark with me. I'm really excited to talk to Marcia because she's got some really interesting concepts and ideas that we really had a debate, didn't we?
We did.
But Marcia, do you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do?
Sure. My name is Marsha Clark, and I started my own company about 22 years ago, and we deliver leadership and executive development programs, and we do that through coaching, through workshops. I have a book coming out, and I do podcast in support of the book, and so this is a perfect venue, and I work with both men and women, but the specialty programs that I've done have been with women in particular, having been one for a long time and having worked with them for a long time. And prior to that, I was with a technology company called EDS for 21 years. So I love the audience that we have with us today.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Marcia, for introducing yourself. I think it's really fun for me. All this time I've been interviewing really women from everything, from IT to, when we geek out. But what's interesting, I realized this recently, I've been interviewing a lot of entrepreneurs. And it's really been cool because I feel like you're another one. And I'm talking to you about your subject matter, your expertise. But in fact, I'm always talking to entrepreneurs. So I'm excited to talk about what we're talking about today, which is invisible differences. So I know you sent me a little spreadsheet on it, but let's talk through. There's invisible differences that happen at every stage of development. So let's get into it.
Yeah, sure. Sure. So, the research says that men and women are about 96, 97% the same. And I just ask anybody that I talk to, do you think that 3 or 4% difference makes a difference? Does it matter? And of course, it's an overwhelming yes. And so a lot of the work that I'm going to share with you is based on decades of research about noticing how men and women think differently about leadership, about power, how we approach new situations, some of our different linguistic patterns, our ability to read others or not read others from a verbal, nonverbal point of view. So there's some things I'd love to share with you today.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the early signs and the childhood lessons. That's what I love, talking about how, because I have a boy and a girl. So I'm just saying I'm talking about this for the different way they approach life. So I'm interested in this. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've had your own lab for a few years to see that. Yeah. So it's fascinating. I often get asked the question, is leadership, or is it made or, nurtured, or, how does that work? And the answer is they do studies, and they're called pink blanket and blue blanket studies. And what those studies show us is how babies develop, and they watch them in the first 24 hours. And what they notice is that boy babies by far notice sound, lights, and movement, big movement. So they're watching the nurses walk across the nursery. They're watching the machines, that are monitoring all their vitals. All of that is what they pay attention to. Girl babies, on the other hand, look at the faces of their caregivers 400 times more. Now get that, 400 times more than boy babies do in the first 24 hours. So that hasn't been socially conditioned. And what that looks like, I know that sounds, well, why are we talking about babies? Well, here's the reality of it. If you watch your toddlers progress, boys love noisy toys, fast toys, vroom, vroom, all that stuff.
Right.
And girls are playing relationship building games. So house or school or, that sort of thing. But the eye contact that they're making with their caregivers is what we do as females early to establish relationships.
Wow. That's really interesting. We had this funny story of my kids trying to play together. My daughter was playing with a Barbie and my son was playing with a Pokemon. And they're saying, and my daughter was saying, now they're going to sit down and have a nice lunch, Jeremy. So there's not going to be any criminals coming in or anything else. And he sat quietly for a minute and he goes, what if the lights go out? And it was just like, boom, there it is. There's the difference between boys and girls. And I didn't even realize there was all this studies on it. So that's amazing. Yeah.
No, that's exactly right. And let me tell you something. The further studies show that if you give a girl like a truck, boys like to play with that mobile things. Yeah. She'll cradle it like a baby. And if you give a boy a doll, it is not unusual for him to break off the arm and make it a gun. and never blinked. And there have been studies that show this over and over. So this innate part of being who we are is so critical. And why I think it's important to understand that aspect is, if you go to a foreign country, you expect people to speak a different language or have different practices or whatever. And it's like men have their own language, women have their own language, and just the way of seeing the world. And it's us being us. So it takes a little bit out of the, you're trying to drive me crazy, moments out of it.
So let's take it to the next place in terms of relationships and leadership styles. Let's talk about how these subtle differences, because they're really subtle.
They are.
We know they're there, but we don't really, I don't know if everybody, translates that to their day-to-day activity.
Yeah, what I would tell you is that we think it's about this is about Joe. No, it's about men. This is about Susie. No, it's about women. So that's the part where we miss. We think it's individual and personal rather than understanding.
Right.
So how this shows up then as men grow up and the masculine model of organizational life, which we're all living in, because government, business, religion, military, everything is based on a hierarchical model. So if you think about hierarchy, it's like there's the C-suite, the EVPs, the SVPs, the VPs. I mean, everything is, a pecking order, if you will.
Right.
And that's considered to be a masculine model where everything is one up or one down. Where the contrast for women is we live in a flat structure. So this relational thing that we do from early on says we're all in this together and we're all equal. And one of the worst things that a woman can do is kind of put herself above other women, because then we get into who does she think she is? Well, if she's your boss, she's your boss, and you're not, but it gets confusing when women are living in the hierarchy and they're used to that with men, but it becomes a little bit of a problem if we don't understand it when we're working with more women.
Yeah. So when we're talking about getting women into leadership roles, how do you recommend women address and deal with some of these differences? I think because some women do the adoption of all male-like traits,
right,
and other women just go into the placater, I'm here to keep peace.
Right.
But it's like there's a trap.
There is.
Because I've been around for a while too. There's a trap for women, which way you pick, and it's a hard balancing act. So help me understand, what do you coach on?
You're at the heart of what I differentiate, which is different leadership styles are all good when used in the right scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at the hierarchical model, it's typically around command and control. So this is very useful when we're in a crisis situation, when I'm standing up for vital issues, when I've got to make a fast decision or an unpopular decision. I got to say, we're doing X, Y, and Z. It's not up for question. We're not going to talk about it. We're not going to collaborate about it. So the command and control is useful when used in the right situation. For women, it's more about collaboration. So in the spirit of we're all in this together, that's particularly useful when you're learning something new. You need their psychological buy-in, and you need them to go make it work and execute against it. So what I say to every person that I work with in leadership is good leaders know they have a toolkit. Great leaders know what tool to use when.
Okay.
And so there's a time for command and control. There's a time for collaborate. There's a time for negotiations. And each of those, what we've got to pay attention to is get really clear about what I'm trying to achieve, and then determine what would be the best approach or strategy that I should use in order to go make that happen.
So question is, do we also do the same thing for men and tell them this is what you need to do, more collaboration? I'm just flipping the script here. I'm saying, let's look at the other side. Women, I know women are doing what you're talking about. I know I do it. I'm like, read the room, make a decision, or get collaboration. I do this all the time, and you learn. If you're in business, you'd learn to do this at any point.
Right.
So what do we do to get coach men up on this? That's my question.
Well, every class that I do, there's a over under bet by my staff of how long is it going to take to ask that very question? Because it's like, when do the men have to learn about this?
We're 10 minutes in. I got it.
All right. So the reality is that the smartest men are going to figure this out. And that because they're working with and for and around women. And if they understand that leadership is about engaging and inspiring your people to do their best work and allowing them to bring the best of themselves to the work itself, then they're going to figure out, I can't do this the same.
Right.
So this idea of, boys, and we bring the rules of the playground into the workplace, right? So work is the adult form of play. Mm-hmm. So boys know how to, get the play from the coach and go run the play. Women want to talk about, well, what do you think we should do? Well, and so this idea of men are having to learn it. But I will tell you, having done this work specifically around women for 22 years, I've made several forays into trying to engage the men, and it is a slow pull because guess what? The system they've been operating in has worked for them very well.
Has worked fine.
Yeah. So what would motivate them to change? I now work for a woman. I now have women on my team. I got to figure this out, but it's not, please come teach me about it. It's like, this is exhausting. This is, exasperating. Help me. And so we got to jump in, but we need men as allies because they still are, at the helm of so many organizations and institutions, and we need all of us to make it work.
No, I agree with you on that. I don't mean to make it a man or woman thing. I just think that I feel like, yes, you're right. The structure is set up so they get the feedback that they need to get. But I feel like these days it's changing. Do you think leadership in organizations is changing to be more collaborative and to do more of this balancing act of read the room? I mean, how are men at reading the room? I don't know. Some men are great at it. Some men are not. Some women aren't either, so it's not just men.
Right, yeah. But what I will tell you, though, is in the bell-shaped curve, women are much better at reading the room because we're better at empathy.
Right.
And we've had to learn empathy. For any of us who are mothers know that this cry means I'm wet, this cry means I'm hungry. Those are all the nonverbals, right?
Right.
So let me tell you about tests that have been done, and it's using PET scans on our brains. So you put the little electrodes all over your skull, and then they read the brain activity. They show men 10 pictures of emotional faces, and they're asked to name what emotion it is. And their whole brain lights up. They're working really hard, and they get most of them wrong. You do the very same thing with a woman, and there's this little center at the head, at top of her, in the middle of her brain that's active, and she gets most of them right. And quite honestly, back in my EDS days, the salespeople used to take me on sales calls, not because I was a salesperson or could talk about the specifics of technology. I just told them, okay, you need to work on Joe over there because he's not buying one thing you're saying. And you need to talk about this, that, and the other with this person because that's where they really got interested. They called me their secret weapon. So we need to bring that strength of ours to the table, and that's how we can get a seat at the table, if you will, because we bring that value, and we need to let people understand that.
Marcia, that is so funny. I had a similar experience, except it was flipped. My client always brought me in with our sales guy, and I'm not going to say what company it was. I'm not going to say the sales guy, but the client would have say, you sit here, and he would watch me while the sales guy was talking. And one time I just said to him, oh, you're pissing off the sales guy because you're staring at me while I said, why are you doing this to me? And he's like, I'm doing it because your face doesn't lie.
There you
go. I know when he's talking, you're giving it a yes or no. And I'm trying to be deadpan, but you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. The body keeps the score. It knows what's going on. If I can just add one more story.
No, go ahead.
When I'm talking about sales, women selling to women is a certain strategy. Women selling to men is a certain strategy. Men selling to men and men selling to women. I did a study for a large consultancy, and that's what was the outcome of that. Because, the woman is the account director of the customer relationship. And so she's bringing in this guy who's going to talk about his specialty area, trying to sell to this woman. And she set him up. She talked in clear terms about how to do it. Of course, he didn't do any of that. He went through his 42 slides and he walked out saying, I think that went great. And the client, the female client, told her female account director from that team, never bring him in here again.
Yeah. Right.
That's the contrast. I got through all my slides. I got to say everything I wanted to, so I'm sure that meant the sales deal went well. No,
Right.
Not with a woman. Not with a woman.
I always say, look, let's make sure we're not boiling the ocean at the time with the client. If it's a woman, I don't know if I do it for women, but I always stop. Is this helpful? Is this useful? Does this help you understand what we're doing? And I'm not in sales. I'm doing the implementation of software, but it's pretty, and I just do it unconsciously, but that's very interesting that you say that. So you did a study on this.
Because we're talking our same language when we're talking to another woman.
Right.
Now, admittedly, as women rise to the most senior levels, you got to do it quick and be fast and, all of that kind of stuff. And yet there's this part of engage me in the conversation. I mean, I could give you an example. 70% of women after their husbands die change their financial planner because the financial planner, one, never asked them what they wanted, two, even when they ask a question, answered it back to their husband, and then come and tell them, okay, here's what we're going to do. And the woman says, not so fast. And he looks at her like she's got three heads. And she says, look, you've never engaged me. We have to engage women to be part of the exchange in the conversation.
Wow. I think I have, that is amazing. I think that we've wrapped it all up. Marsha, let's go solve the problems of the world. I think we're good.
Yes.
But that was great. I really love talking to you. And we're going to have another conversation. I think we should get into some of the more detailed, I'm a data geek, so we'll do that sometime.
Well, and I just want to say, recognizing that men and women have all of these differences, if we can look at them as they're just swimming in their water and I'm just swimming in mine, and I know I need to lean in here and I need to lean out here and I need to dial up here and dial down there, the smarter we can be about that in recognizing some of these differences. We hear the phrase, know your audience, but we don't always put the gender aspect in there. We just say, oh, this person likes charts and graphs, and this person likes stories, and this person likes metaphors. But it's so much more than that. And we've got to get to the answer and to the point fast, and then we can back it up. But being able to understand this is critical. And I'd love to, there's so much more we could talk about. Yeah. So I would love to come back and share some insights.
Okay. Hey, Marcia, what is the name of your book and your podcast so I can plug it for you?
Thank you. So the name of the book, it comes out on November 16th, is Embracing Your Power. And the subtitle is A Woman's Path to Authentic Leadership and Meaningful Relationships. And I really want to there's three words in there that are really important. Power, you have it, use it, and use it for good, not, and that means in service. The other is leadership. Leadership is a mindset. It's how we choose to live our lives. And the authentic part, and this is what I have strived to do from the beginning for women, is that I want you to define success on your own terms, not on what somebody else thinks they want for you or from you. So bringing your best self to whatever you're doing, life, community, family, work, customers, whatever. That's the part that I think is really important. And so it's a book full of tools and stories and tips and research, and you can read it alone or you can read it as a book club. And then the podcast, Your Authentic Path to Powerful Leadership. You see, I got all those words in again. And we're going to talk about many of these things, and we'll be doing those weekly.
All right. Well, I'm gonna subscribe because I'm a podcast. As you can tell, I'm a podcast fiend. But I'm really excited about it. So, Marcia, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And it was great being with you. And here's to women supporting women.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, welcome back. That was an awesome interview with Marcia Clark. So thanks, Jeannie, for that. What did you think, Lois?
Oh, that was fantastic. I have all these notes in front of me, just writing down things not only for us to talk about, but honestly, just things to keep in mind that I want to apply to what I'm doing, whether it's at work or, personally. She just had a lot of great ways to look at life around us and, how we should really be excited about who we are and where we are and how we fit in, and probably explain some things that we've dealt with in the past. So I thought it was really insightful.
All right, well, let's go down our list because I did the same thing. My first kind of area that I took really pause in was when she was talking the pink blankie, blue blankie, like right from birth, you come out and we have these differences that are part of our nature. And I really cued into the one for females where just in their very first hours, the girl babies looked at faces 400 times more in that first little period. And I thought, wow. And she went on to talk about how establishing relationships and using those visual cues was so important. And the thing that jumped out in my mind, Lois, was what happens as we're in a masking society, whether everybody puts on masks or some people put on masks, like, does that adversely impact women more? Because maybe beyond birth, are we also wired to those visual cues and those visual indicators? And are we disadvantaged in some way by the fact that
it's a really good concept? Or I don't know if it's disadvantage, or we probably had to figure out workarounds, because you're right. You think about, we do read a room. She was even talking about how well women are reading a room. I even heard not only visually reading a room, but I've talked to in a sales capacity where I'll have somebody who's male say, and I really want so-and-so who's a woman on the phone, because after we get off the phone, she was listening so much better than I was able to. And she is telling me things that I missed, kind of like the example she used about being in a room. And I think we as women visually or listen, we are relating, I think, to who we're talking to. And I don't know if I guess I feel for those who are babies who were born and looking at their hospital staff going, oh my gosh, what are all these masked people that I'm looking at? But yeah, it was interesting to hear how much women, it's a real thing, right? It's not just how we treat children, boys or girls. It's a real thing.
Yeah, and we hear it. I think we hear it as the schools struggle with the issue, right? Like, how are these kids who are just learning how to be social and have friends, how are they supposed to make connections when you can't, whisper, flash certain grins or looks? And so all of society has been challenged by this, and I'm sure we all hope it goes away some way, shape, or form. But in the meantime, we have to deal with it. We have to figure out how to get our cues in.
That's right. That's right. Well, and that brought on to another topic that I thought was really good. I think it was in that same area. She talked about how women tend to work better in a flatter sort of relationship-based structure, and men tend to work more effectively in more of a hierarchical, almost like sports. Maybe that's why men are so fascinated with sports, because it's kind of a call to play and they need to go do it. And I think, one of the statements that I heard her say, which I loved, leadership is about engaging and tapping on all your talents. It makes me feel like this is a period of time where we need leadership teams that have both men and women, or teams that are able to work in the different ways, because they are going to operate differently. And there's situations that come up that require someone to be very, just really drive the play, because we need someone to drive the play. But there's other times then we need to have that collaboration. So I thought that was just, it really brought to my attention why it's so important in business, in any sort of team. You need that, ability to have both sorts of skill sets to come to play.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you're actually causing me to think about one of my next points more broadly than I had when I heard it. I focused in on an area where she was talking about sell strategies by gender, where, a female sells to a female one way will be different than a male sells to a male, female to male, and all the different combinations. And it made me wonder, as I think about human resources, where we do have, probably a greater percentage of females, how that really plays out. And now I'm actually thinking about it in light of your comment more broadly, because you really don't do a lot. It's not often a one-to-one sale, right? I mean, there's just a big complexity around that now. But it made me, made the alpha in me wanted to sit down and write all the combination of pairs and think about, okay, but how do I sell this way? How do I sell that way? What am I supposed to do?
Well, and I think for sales teams, and, I'm sitting in sales these days, when we sell, you're right, there's a whole room, there's a whole audience that you're selling to, and now over the phone and through Zoom or Teams. And I think it's really important then we have a mixture of voices and a mixture of ways, because there is going to be a broad range of ways that, people receive information, can able to engage into it. And so I think any sort of team or any sort of sales group or any messaging that is important to have done, you recognize there is that variation, and you need multiple folks who are providing that messaging, figuring out how to deliver that messaging so that you have the broadest amount of appeal and impact. So yeah, I took the note from a sales side to say, we got to figure this out and make sure that we incorporate that.
That's right. And how do you even know who is the one you're selling to, right? I mean,
Exactly.
Really.
Exactly.
Things are more and more collaborative every day. So my next note, Lois, actually kind of shocked me when I heard it. I thought, I wasn't sure if I was sad or exactly what my reaction was, but it really struck me when Marcia said 70% of women change their financial planner when their husband is out of the picture. And I think she said largely because they had been either excluded or not really, a serious part of the conversation. And, not only did I think, wow, that's amazing. That's 70% is a huge number. But it made me just kind of think about our business when it comes to advisory, consulting and advisory, being a trusted advisor. It's the same sort of relationship. And so, do we have situations where, we need to think about the relationship and the parties that are not the dominant players in the relationship? Because couldn't that same dynamic apply to us? Or, if there's a change in senior leadership and they just by connection, want to, start new or start fresh, or assume that, their trusted advisor can't do something in a different way or bring different resources and strengths to the table. And so that one really caught my attention.
Yeah. And I think that comes to my last thought. She had 3 keywords that she focused on also in her podcast. It was power, leadership, and my favorite word is authentic. And I think based on what you just said and the fact that, leaders need to look at all the various traits in their organization, we need the diversity within our organization. If there is ever a time where, maybe we thought, if we're going to work in IT, that's mostly men, I need to learn how to read the sports, how everybody did over the weekend. So I had something to talk about on Monday morning, or I needed to figure out how to present myself in a way that would be more accepted. Actually, we have an opportunity, I think, now to be authentic. This is, I think, the time where it is very respected and really sought after, I think, for all kinds of personalities. And, to be authentic to who you really are, now is the time to really, look at your own strengths and really bring them forward. And so, that might be just the right person to be able to have that relationship with someone across the table, and you want to be authentic with that person.
Oh, I'm so excited because, honestly, I failed miserably by most of my career at trying to bone up on sports to pretend that I could follow a conversation that I had zero interest in, really. And I can't help but wonder sometimes for women, it's family, or it's children, or it's got to be equally terrifying for men, right? Thinking about, do I have to figure out what my kids did this last couple of weeks to be able to have a conversation with these ladies, or what?
Do I dare say anything about her necklace that looks really nice, or would that be wrong?
Exactly.
That's what they're thinking.
So at least we're equal terrified opportunists or something. I don't know.
That's true. Well, this has been insightful. This has been actually fun. And I know that Jeanne And Marcia talked about maybe getting back together again. I think that would be a great encore podcast if we could have her back. So we'll have to mention that to Jeannie, that maybe that would be great to hear from her again. And maybe all three of us could be on the phone with her. I'm a little bit jealous. I want to be involved next time.
Oh, no. Ask and you shall receive.
All right. Well, it was good chatting with you again, Julie.
You too. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on ISG Digital Dish. If you like our podcast, subscribe and please rate and review us. Thanks.